those of you joining us. My name is Marquessa Finch, and I am a board member on the for the Patientory Association. Welcome. We will just give a few minutes to our participants and attendees to join us, and we'll get started in a little bit. Okay, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Marquessa Finch. I am a board member with the Patientory Association, and I am very excited to bring you this webinar for the Patientory Association's webinar series. Today, we are talking about medical device interoperability and meaningful use. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce our esteemed speakers and panelists. So today we'll be hearing from Gina Malik. She is CEO and CTO of blockinterrupt, as well as Dr. Mazen Gadir, who is an ambassador with the Patientory Association. Jim Sinclair as well is an ambassador with the Patientory Association. And Osama El Hassan is with the Smart Health Department, with the Dubai Health Authority. And of course, myself, Marquessa, will be moderating today's webinar. So if we can get to the next slide, the agenda, please. Oh, yes, excuse me. I'd like to just announce that we are doing a webinar offer today, a free consultation on the P-Toy Matrix blockchain network. So if anyone is interested in learning more about the P-Toy Matrix or how to build on it, please contact us at info@patientoryassn.org. Okay. So today's agenda is pretty straightforward. We have about 45 minutes of a presentation from our panelists. Each will be speaking about their different backgrounds and projects that they're working on as it pertains to this subject. Some of the things that we'll hear about is first a historical overview and meaningful use of the technology. We'll be hearing about what's going on in the United Arab Emirates with regulation, digital maturity, and then some of the issues with lack of standardization. And then finally, we'll hear some global challenges from our panelists as they've experienced through their work. And then finally, we'd like to present to you blockinterrupt, one of Patientory Association's members, and what they've been doing with the P-Toy network. So we'll hear from Gina then. Finally, we'll hear about some use cases and then conclude with some Q&A. Now, so if anyone has a question throughout the webinar, please do write it in the Q&A function down at the bottom. And I will make sure to be combing through those throughout the presentation to get them answered at the end. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So a few definitions first. We want to make sure just everyone is on the same page about some of these terms that we're using. So, feel free to snap a picture of this if you need to, but we'll just start with interoperability, a characteristic of a product or system whose interfaces are completely understood to work with other products or systems at present or in the future in either implementation or access without any restrictions. Second term we'll be using throughout the webinar is medical device interoperability. And what we mean by this is the reference to information sharing from one device to another or between devices and electronic health records. Functional interoperability would enable clinical medical devices to communicate in a consistent, predictable, and reliable way. So then medical devices interoperability will be the first section from a regulatory perspective. And so at this point, I believe that we have our panelists coming on. The first panelist up is Dr. Osama. So I'd like to pass the ball over to Dr. Osama to take it away.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
welcome.
So let me start by talking about what's happening actually in the UAE from the regulatory perspective. So in the UAE in 2019, I think early 2019, we came up with a new law called ICT for healthcare. And this is actually some sort of a regulation, like we can consider it as a HIPAA-like, which stipulates or put forward the privacy law for healthcare, and it has many items. Mostly, it talks about that, or it stipulates that the patient now owns his data. And data cannot be exchanged without the consent of the patient unless very limited situation. I can give you an example for that during public health issues, for example. So this is the main thing. Additionally, also, it's paved the way for establishing what we call the health information exchange systems. Which allows developing a unified medical record for citizens across the UAE. So this is one of the key projects that's happening now. So as we speak, we have now 3 HIE projects happening in the UAE, one in Abu Dhabi and one in Dubai, and the third one for Ministry of Health. So Abu Dhabi project has just started, I think, 12 months ago. Dubai project is being launched this month, and Ministry of Health project will be early next year. So to help onboarding all the healthcare ecosystem to this kind of projects or health information exchange, we have to make sure that all healthcare organizations are at the right level of maturity. And because of that, since maybe 5 or 6 years, all the regulators are pushing all the hospitals to focus more on the digital healthcare transformation within their hospitals. And we've been, for example, pushing for the MRAM survey, HIMSS MRAM survey since 2012. And as you know, part of the HIMSS MRAM, it's actually encourage interoperability even at the device level. So for example, to get stage 5 or stage 6, you have to make sure that you have the full circulation of medication. That means that even devices like IV pumps should be able to connect to EMRs to make sure that you give the right dose to the right patient at the right time. So this is kind of projects, kind of technology that we are currently using, and we are encouraging them to be used more and more. So this is just a high level of what we are trying to do. So again, so make sure that the device interoperability in devices is very important. Why? Because it improves patient care, it reduces errors and encourage innovation and enhance the outcomes. So can you go to another uh, next one? So medical device interoperability as an example for that, as I mentioned, a hospital chief officer may say that having an IV pump, medication error, and one adverse drug events were driving factors in going all digital. So this is just one use case that shows the importance of having interoperability at the medical device level. And this can just one example showing that by adopting such a technology, the number of errors goes down, and even the number of steps that we need to implement to make sure that an IV was correctly attached to the patient will be even 86% reduced. So achieving interoperability between IV pumps and device and EMR must be realized, the only way to realize such automation. So as I mentioned, also such integration are actually encouraged by the HEMS EMRA. Just go next one. So risk associated with medical device interoperability. So many medical devices store and share personal health identifier. And as we know that many hospitals now and even regulators are creating what we call IoT strategy. And IoT implementation strategy mainly focus on this kind of those products who are or devices which are actually storing personal data, and we want to make sure that these pieces of data will never go to the right or the wrong place. So one of the issues that we have of interoperability is the complexity, and the complexity increases as we go from functional up to the workflow level. Also, one of the key issues that we have with interoperability in medical devices is scalability. Until today, yes, we have many use cases around medical device interoperability, but we haven't reached a level where this becomes functional on a network level, or I'm talking about the ecosystem level. So it needs a lot of work to be done from vendors and from regulators as well. And we need to do a lot of things around incentives or even doing sandboxing to support this kind of collaboration between vendors and regulators. Next. So I think we can, this is another one, yeah? Okay.
Yes,
So,
thank you, Dr. Osama. This is Mazin Gadir, an ambassador for Patient Tori Association and a director in IQVIA. Actually, it's such an honor to be with you guys, with you today, and to continue the rhythm of Dr. Osama and basically the content of Dr. Osama. Apologies for the kids, but they are still making a lot of noise. Anyways, if we go to the next slide, what Dr. Osama has produced for us in the first 4 slides is the direction of the interoperability with medical devices and the importance of data. And what the landscape is in the UAE, obviously, they have been a huge push towards exploration of artificial intelligence, the law, the healthcare, the UAE healthcare ICT data law that Dr. Osama has referred to. Regulators in this land has been maturing up. At the moment, obviously, our first mission to space has been announced 20th of July 2020. And don't forget, this is bringing up also a new paradigm in the idea of space medicine and the importance of data. And if I take you to the next slide, you will see that the exploration of disrupting healthcare, building on top of the important standards of interoperability and reliance on the medical devices technology in the healthcare space could take us further to start planning for the 2071 strategy for healthcare. In 2071, the UAE would complete 100 years of its existence since the founding father, His Highness Sheikh Zayed, late the late leader of this country. And the idea is to try and build upon the infrastructure that has been put forth in the UAE as a leader in this region in the healthcare technology and digital disruption. So this slide shows you that definitely the groundwork or the infrastructure for us to start building on top of our future in healthcare is based on data. Whether it's in genomics, whether the use of AI and data science, the move into decision science rather than just relying on data science, education and research, because the areas of exploration will actually look at these different pillars on the left-hand side: space medicine, the future of health economics, and whatnot. So the vision is to take and continue building on the infrastructure, using the interoperability standards, relying on the future of medical devices and the IoT and blockchain to build the grounds for exploration and future enhancements. If I move to the next slide, this will show us that obviously the future of healthcare in the UAE relies on the concepts of value-based care, the quadruple aim, specifically looking at not only cost optimization and reduction, not only improvement of quality, enhancing of patient experience, but also the most important part is actually your healthcare workforce, your healthcare and clinical frontliners who are in our thoughts, specifically at this time where COVID-19 is being fought. So, and this is very important, the reliance on decision science, the reliance on a much more enhanced computing capabilities with the presence of nanotechnology and innovation. Moving on to the last slide. Opportunities, there is a lot of opportunities. The UAE being the hub and the leader for disruption and innovation, the reliance on interoperability as data being the core focus of our healthcare industry in the Middle East and the UAE specifically, and becoming a leader as we go around the region where health information exchange, medical device interoperability, claims and financial services integration platform becomes the focal point of your promotion or enhancement of your healthcare system. With this, that concludes my section. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hello, this is Gina Malik, and thank you so much for Krista for this platform and partnering with me to host this very disruptive subject, medical device interoperability and meaningful use. It's a pleasure to be on the platform as well with Dr. Asma and Dr. Maizen. So my partners in there in the UAE. And I've always loved to work with you guys, and thank you for joining us as well. I want to give an introduction about blockinterrupt and what we do. Blockinterrupt, we are a digital health company, and we focus on the development, acquisitions, and investments of healthcare, meaningful use applications, web services, data transformation tools. Together, our company, we have over 20 years experience in healthcare interoperability, as well as public health as well. So, this is some of our mentions. We've been around for 2 years with blockinterrupt, and so our focus is, if you go to the next slide, is that our focus is to help decentralize electronic health records by enabling medical devices and also data to be accessible to clinicians, labs, hospitals, pharmacies, patients. And and it's a benefit because what we're doing with our company, that this both benefits the patient and also healthcare providers, and providing a benefit of a robust data exchange platform. And that's what we're developing. We are laying the foundation for a SaaS and also a iPaaS network by creating smart contract marketplaces for digital health products, which is Dash. And with Dash, with the next slide, please. What we have is we're developing our first MVP. It's called Loop. And Loop is a medical device management DApp. And what Loop does, it will provide data medical device management services for patients. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what the patient does is what patients say, for example, you just had a procedure, and with this procedure, say for you had a stent, and with the procedure, you also receive an application from your provider or the facility where you had your surgical facility. And with that, you'll be able to receive updates on how your medical device is doing or any other updates that you get from the doctor in reference to care. Also real-time updates from the FDA if there's any maintenance issues or any recalls as well. So we are looking to focus on meeting meaningful use initiatives, but also making medical devices interoperable between the patients and also the providers. And again, this will be on our Loop Medical Device Management. It's our SaaS, and it will be available on our DashNet marketplace. Next slide, please. And these are just some of our moonshots. As I mentioned, we want to be able to connect patients and providers with hospital organizations. Also, with the global pandemic, we want to do our part as well as combating COVID-19. And how do we do that is bringing digital health solutions around the world and to help battle this pandemic, and also in aid and humanity. And then also decentralized healthcare applications and services that will provide protection from ransomware, and also offering traceability, security, and interoperability. And with medical devices, being able to be on the front of thinking about how can we help not only just, patient records as well, but also medical devices, which is also an ancillary service within the hospital. So we think about ancillary solutions and services and how we can help to make that interoperable and being able to have a network of providers to be able to share that information, and also education, and also making the patient records interoperable. And not just with healthcare, but also this transcend over to dental as well. Next slide, please. Next slide. So here's some use cases. And these use cases was from one of our advisors. He is a professor in university, a professor. He helped us come across some of these use cases that him as a surgeon himself, he sees the need of having medical device interoperability, what we're currently doing right now. And for this use case, we had a young child who had water in the brain where the caregiver did not know the type of shunt or the settings. And so they had to resort to an X-ray and CT scan, which can be very harmful to children. And we want to be able to avoid this at all costs because, as you can see the numbers here, one CT scan every 10,000 children cause one incurable or deadly cancer. Use case number 2. Another one, a woman who was on her way to a total paralysis due to a spinal cord issue. She needed an MRI scan for her spine. However, she had a brain aneurysm, clipped somewhere a few years ago. And even though her physician recognized the clip in the MRI, The radiologists, for the guidelines of from the Radiological Association, did not want to take the risk of the clip moving or being heated. So it took them 3 days of urgent treatment to get the implant record from the hospital to provide that clip use. And so this is where we can come in with interoperability to be able to get information directly from the manufacturer, from the FDA, and then having that, having some type of a platform to bring all that information in, and then we have the blockchain. And patients to already come in and help with the blockchain services. And with blockinterrupt, we can be able to provide ancillary solutions as well to make some of these use cases help solve a problem to some of these use cases that we can avoid death or also, personal injuries. Next slide, please. And then also another one was a patient who had been in an accident a few years earlier, and part of his skull replaced with a titanium mask. Again, no records were available, and it required a physician to send his X-ray to the manufacturer of the implant, who then confirmed the type of implant. So, just think about how long did that take? So if we can have some type of interoperable or real-time solution where we can get this data real time, this is where we're heading, and this is what we're focused on developing to bring the solution on a global level. And I think that should, let me see, meaningful use. I think that should conclude my presentation. And that's just more information about who we are as Loop Medical Device Solutions. Our solution is to meet meaningful use objectives that address the public health and also facilitate healthcare interoperability needs. So we encourage patient engagement, seamless health information exchange, and public health reporting. Next slide, please. And these are some of our integrated partners. We have Patientory, Hands, Heart Hugs, Open EHR, Healthy Med Records, Flipping Innovations, and then also we've also are part of the development platform of Epic, App Orchard, Open FDA, Cerner, Allscript, and Meditech. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. At this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Mazen Gadir back to speak with us about medical device and IoT.
These are my slides.
Oh, are these your slides? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
So Jim will be joining us for this portion, excuse me, and will be talking to us about medical device and IoT. Take it away, Jim.
Great, thank you very much. Glad to be here, and just want to spend a few slides talking about standard development efforts that relate to medical device interoperability and the applicability for blockchain in the medical and meaningful use and healthcare interoperability. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview of the concept of IoT and medical devices, otherwise known as the Internet of Medical Things. You can see from the numbers there that the global IoMT market, as it's now referred to, has been growing since 2016. Should be over $72 billion in 2021 and still has a continued annual compounded growth rate of 26%. This market consists of smart devices, wearables, home health monitoring, devices that are used in a clinical setting, in a community setting, in a hospital. And it really reflects the fact that, as I'm sure many of the participants are aware, there was a time when a medical device was a box and it sat next to your hospital bed or something you were administered in ambulatory care. And just like the rise of your smart speaker at home or your home security system, all of these things have now taken on characteristics of internet-enabled, internet-capable, self-processing electronic devices that don't have the same traditional isolated sort of functionality. And that brings on whole new challenges in considering both the environments of how they've operated, who is used to using them and operating them, and the data that they provide. Next slide, please. So as a result, most people are aware of the fact that there is a growing risk of vulnerability in IoT and IoMT devices. Most of the software depends on third-party components, and there's little visibility in where the software supply chain is. That software supply chain also changes very rapidly. So one manufacturer may be using one partner one day and another partner another day. The vulnerabilities are both the byproduct of human processes in developing software and the fact that they're increasingly frequent targets of attack in the software supply chain. And the sad fact of the matter is, when it comes to home IoT devices and even medical IoT devices, IoMT devices, one of the first places to get information on vulnerabilities is simply to call up the manufacturer or go to their website and find that you can physically download copies of the specifications and schematics of the devices themselves. And that's mainly because this has never been a sort of world culturally that people had to worry about cybersecurity or what sorts of international standards were being applied in your data management and supply chain management of these components. So when a new risk is discovered, few organizations are really able to say, are we affected? If so, how are we affected? And this lack of transparency creates substantial problems for cybersecurity risks and the cost of development, procurement, and maintenance of these systems. Next slide, please. One of the initiatives that is working to address this is led by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, otherwise called the NTIA, and they came up with the SBON Project. The goal was to bring together perspectives from across supply chains to understand the potential needs and obstacles of widespread adoption of software transparency, to understand where software is coming from, how it's being manufactured, and what sort of industry standards are being applied. In that process of establish the software bill of materials, or the SBOM. Within healthcare, there has been a successful execution of a proof of concept exercise that involves several hospital systems and providers, several device manufacturers such as Philips, I believe, as well as some cybersecurity engineers to use SBOM data from medical device manufacturers in real hospital security systems and help hospitals understand and provide real-time visibility into software vulnerabilities in their IoMT devices as they're identified and become promulgated within the information security community. Next slide, please. Additionally, within the IEEE, we have a new initiative called TIPS. It focuses on these 6 primary topic areas: trust, only allowing designated people and services to have device or data access; identity, validating the identity of the people, the services, and things being the IoMT device itself; privacy, ensuring the device, personal and sensitive data information are kept private and only disclosed when required to the authorized system recipients or authorized personnel. The devices are protected from harm, both physical, financial, and reputational. That medical safety is maintained above and beyond everything else, of course. That's paramount for the devices, the infrastructure, and the people that are serving them. And then, of course, security, maintaining the security of the data, the devices, the people, etc. And that has all now been bundled up together into an IEEE working group, P2933. The cool thing is that there are several of us who are all involved in P2933 that also overlap into the SBON project and into other work groups on this as well. Next slide, please. Here's a quick eye-full overlay chart that just shows you the architectural framework for how clinical IoT data and device interoperability corresponds with the TIPS architecture concept. You'll notice an entire layer there dedicated to the distributed ledger technology that sits right below the APIs and software development kits. It integrates into various levels of health data integration with HL7 standard, SNOMED, LOINC, CPT codes, ICD-10, etc. And that the user experience, user interface points of the patients, the providers, payers, regulators, etc. And then down at the very bottom, the data sources and targets, both on-chain and off-chain, are all of these applications for clinical IoT and IoMT type devices and their clinical application layer. Next slide, please. Oh, I thought I had one more slide here, but that's okay. I would just add there's also another working group within the Sovereign Foundation dedicated to self-sovereign identity, which that overlaps into P2933 as well. And in there, we are on the process of publicly announcing the launch of a self-sovereign identity and IoT working group to look at a lot of these topics as well to address identity and device management. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So I'll just quickly remind everybody to please submit your questions in the Q&A portal at the bottom of your Zoom window. I will start with our first question. Our first question is, how does the IEEE TIPS, excuse me, sorry, let me just reread this question. Okay, thank you, Roa Salman. So the question is, how does the IEEE TIPS ensure data privacy and security? So this is for you, Jim.
I take myself off mute, I'm sorry. Yeah, so like all other IEEE working groups, the idea is to include participants to develop internationally recognized standards for data and for processes. The TIPS concept in the working group is trying to codify standardized approaches to how medical devices are developed, how the software is developed, and how they're implemented, tested, and certified, so that those TIPS principles are built into every device and allow a manufacturer to be able to assert that they're built to an IEEE standard. Those standards are still ongoing, which is why it's still a working group and in development now.
Thank you. This next question is for Dr. Gadir. So Dr. Gadir, within the value-based healthcare building blocks that you presented, could you expand a little bit more on where the low-hanging fruit might be in terms of implementing blockchain technology? So, you know, let's say within the next 1 to 2 years of being scalable.
Sure. So basically, the low-hanging fruits will be number one. I would suggest some in the patient apps or even in the provider apps. So anything that would entail producing or developing a mobile app that would allow data to be securely stored and easily accessed will be a huge market in the UAE, as they are still building the health information exchange platform, which will go live very soon in Dubai. Already Abu Dhabi has their health information exchange up and running, and then the API platform would allow, obviously, integrating with allow applications to be developed and integrated within that platform. So I believe developing mobile apps on blockchain technology would be a great quick win, specifically as the law for healthcare data is maturing up in terms of policies being translated into policies and regulations. Data obviously has to reside within the country, for example, within the UAE, and a lot of telco providers and cloud services and basically technology companies, government-based or public or private sector-based, will actually are working to try and speed the infrastructure readiness to bring in a blockchain powered mobile apps. And I think that's where an explosion will happen in the next 2 years due to the ease, the security privileges and the benefits, as well as the infrastructure infrastructure readiness. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to bring Gina Malik back up. Gina, with regards to your moonshot items that you presented, the one that's most I would say relevant to what we're going through every day right now is how to combat COVID-19. But can we expand further on how you think blockchain, but especially your company, how do we go beyond this pandemic? How do we make ourselves a little bit more prepared for the next global health crisis that could come up? It could be another virus, it could be something else, but how do you see us unfolding this technology to better prepare ourselves for something like this in the future?
I think is that we really focus really on the government level as well, more on digital health and innovations with healthcare, creating solutions that will not just have like peer-to-peer solutions. Like I've been a HL7 interface analyst for 20 years. And oftentimes data is only peer-to-peer to one system to another system, and not being able to interface with multiple systems with multiple languages. So we're talking about HL7 to Fire API, and JSON and XML languages. And so when you have interoperability solutions such as blockchain and also dApps, decentralized applications, in developing these solutions, that would help pour in more data and more analysis, especially when it comes to population health. So if we decide we want to create solutions that's going to have patients' healthcare at their fingertips, but also having interoperable with hospitals, clinics, manufacturers, whether it's pharmacy or also the medical devices, and being able to have this information and have a robust solution where everybody is getting real-time information and real-time data. This will help us with the, not only with the crisis that we're dealing with right now, but also healthcare crises in the future, because now we have data at our fingertips. And what's going to help that is healthcare organizations, the government, and any type of, and also private groups and clinics come together and being a part of an ecosystem and creating a globalized, not just a national, but a globalized interoperability solution, which through HIEs, and then we have to go further out past the HIEs, but also using, blockchain services as well. So I think as we just continue to champion digital health and innovations, that is going to keep us right in front of some of these pandemics that we have right now and then in the future.
Thank you very much. And then I'll just invite anyone to submit some very, very last questions as we wrap up. But this next one is for Dr. Osama. Dr. Osama, incentives. You mentioned incentives in your presentation, and it's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to frontier technologies, much like blockchain. What can you speak on regarding the incentives that you've seen the UAE find most successful? And then how do you think that other countries, especially other regulatory bodies, can learn from the UAE in terms of creating those incentives so this technology can scale to the degree that it can?
Okay, that's a very good question, actually. So when people mention the word incentive, so normally the US-based interpretation of the word incentives, we recall the incentives that were allocated to the meaningful use program, where doctors, clinics were given financial support to make sure that they have the right electronic medical records that really able to exchange data. Within the UAE, normally this kind of incentives are very difficult to implement. Normally, our interpretation of incentives could be a bit different. So it should be trying to support vendors by working very closely with them, by even some sort like, so for example, at DHA now, we are trying to support electronic medical records, which are really implementing the standards that we want for the HIE. So now we are working on a program to develop a list of the best EMRs that can really implement the standards and the workflows that we were going to implement in our HIE. So by that, we mean that those 10 vendors will be having the priority in the market. So they will get market share because they adapt their solutions to our standards. This could be one way of incentivizing vendors to develop tools, products that really matches our needs from the interoperability point of view.
Thank you very much. So this is an open question, our last question of the webinar, but it's an open question to all panelists. And the question is, how could the patient-centered network be beneficial for the interoperability of data? So I'll let anyone jump in.
Sorry, I was on mute. This is Gina. I think with patient-centered interoperability was certainly help service, the medical device, the business of medical devices, because with patient-centered is already on the frontier of healthcare interoperability when it comes to blockchain. And that blockchain being able to have services, and those services can be from, APIs, FHIR integration, AI as well, and Internet of Things. So it's an ecosystem of interoperable solution that can help make healthcare seamless when it comes to communicating and sharing data. And so with my relationship with patient-centered is that we are a digital health company. We build dApps, decentralized applications, and those applications will be interfacing with patient-centered to utilize those interoperability services that the blockchain offers. So yes, I think patient-centered is at a frontier of that and at a very innovative ways to help, combat not only, crisis, but also, such as COVID-19, but also just helping that, hospitals to be able to communicate on demand in real time, no matter where they are globally across the world.
Thank you, Gina. Would anyone else like to comment? Any one of our panelists?
Yes, this is Mazin, if I may just jump in. So basically, I think patient-centered association plays the role of creating communities of sharing by bringing stakeholders together. So the knowledge sharing as well is an important aspect of building momentum when we try to transform and disrupt an industry like healthcare. And having patient-centered association driving this stakeholder engagement, building thought leadership pipeline of sharing of experiences from technology to development to regulators to providers to payers, because blockchain is a very disruptive technology. Bringing it down to bringing it to the clinical community, but would require smoothing the language, diluting the concept, and simplifying the approach. And I believe that is also another vital role that Patientary Association is trying or is doing by bringing major stakeholders to brainstorm, to share experiences, to simplify and make a technological disruption sounds very attractive or more attractive to the clinical community, who are being challenged as we speak, being at the front lines, being burned out, and knowing that making their life easy by bringing in a disruptive platform or technology, decentralized, secure way of building apps or utilizing apps to their fingertips is going to make their lives easy.
Thank you, Mazi. Okay, if there are no other comments to the question, I believe we are wrapping up this webinar. Again, I'd like to remind everyone that if you are interested in the PTOI network, we are offering a free consultation. And I don't know if we have another slide with that information, but if not, we can make sure it's available. There we go. So please do contact us if you're interested. And with that, I would like to thank you for joining us. Please look out for our next webinar, and everyone have a good rest of your day in whatever time zone you're in.
Thank you.